It's time to celebrate because the Church Disrupted podcast was only the beginning. And since we started the podcast last August, we've seen millions of people push play either through the long form podcast or the podcast content that comes from it on social media. And thank you to every single one of you who has pressed play, who has shared content, who sent us messages and left comments. We couldn't do this work without you. And when we started this podcast last August, we knew there was a need, but we had no idea how big the need was. We had no idea how many of you had experienced significant religious trauma, and we had no idea the depths of the spiritual abuse stories that so many of you have. It's been an absolute honor. And guys, I mean that. We're not just saying that. It's been an honor to walk through these stories with you, to help encourage you, to help pray with you, and hopefully to help provide content that has helped you walk through your own journey so that you don't feel like you're walking through your journey alone, so that you don't feel like you're crazy because of what happened to you. Because, hey, let's face it, a lot of the stories we have from religious trauma, from narcissistic abuse, it sounds crazy when you say it out loud because it's the kind of stuff that none of us ever think would happen in churches or in the church. Yet, for many of us, we've experienced it. So we hope that this has been encouraging to you, and we're grateful for every single one of you, every bit of support, no matter how big or how small. But the good news is we're just getting started. Like I said at the beginning, the podcast was just the beginning. And if you missed it last week on May 1st, we officially launched the Spiritual Abuse Institute. And when we launched SAI, we've launched it so that we can do more, help more people, engage with churches and victims alike. And today, on this episode of the Church Disrupted podcast, we're going to talk about the future of the podcast, the future of SAI, and the future of this work that we're going to do to combat spiritual abuse. But not just to combat it, we're going to talk about the work that we're doing to see a world, to see a future where spiritual abuse is no longer the norm, but where spiritual abuse struggles to survive because so many people recognize it and there are so many systems of accountability to protect people instead of allowing people to be hurt over and over and over in the name of Jesus. So hey, if you've been rocking with us for a little while, or if this is the first video you've seen, if you want to hear more about the Spiritual Abuse Institute, we're going to answer tons of your questions that came from you guys, from listeners, from community members. We're going to answer those questions today. We're going to talk about our vision for the future. We're going to talk about what's coming, and we're going to answer some of your general questions about spiritual abuse, religious trauma, and finding healing at the end. So again, if you're ready, let's go ahead and dive in together to today's episode of the Church Disrupted podcast. All right, guys, welcome back to the Church Disrupted podcast with your host, Jeff Cochran. And today we're going to do an episode like we've never done one before. So this is our first solo episode. It's just me. But the reason why it's just me is because today's episode, we're focusing on answering your questions about SAI. We're going to answer all the questions you have about the Spiritual Abuse Institute, why we launched it, why we started it, what it's going to look like, how we're going to be held accountable, and how it's going to affect Church Disrupted and the podcast and content that you've already come to love. So today we're going to talk about all of those things, but we're not just going to talk about them. Today's not just going to be our first solo podcast. Today is going to be our first Q&A podcast. Now, Q&As are something we're wanting to add to a lot of our existing podcasts, maybe have a little segment at the end where we answer some questions, but we also want to do some podcast episodes here and there, like this one, where we only focus on answering your questions. Now, most of the time, those questions aren't going to be about SAI. They're going to be about you. They're going to be about religious trauma issues, spiritual abuse issues, healing issues, re-engagement with church issues that you may have. So stay tuned for those because we want to really add this Q&A portion to the podcast because we want to give you more of a voice. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're answering the questions, guys, that you need answered. But today, we're going to focus specifically on the questions about the Spiritual Abuse Institute because we launched this officially last week. Wednesday, May 1st was when we launched it. And since we launched it, there have been a ton of questions. And we wanted to go ahead and do a couple of things before we ever got started. One, with the launch of SAI, we wanted to open up the Church Disrupted community for free to all of you, right? The very first thing we wanted to do was open up the community so that you could find a place with like-minded people to find healing. And sometimes it's going to be similar to social media comments, but here's where it's going to be different. We don't allow trolls. We don't allow toxicity. We don't allow victim shaming. It's a place where you can be open and honest without having to worry about this stuff, just being out there in the world and having people who just want to attack and dismiss what you felt. It's a place for you to meet people, to be able to not only meet them, but to be able to message them offline, to ask questions, to share your story. So if you have not joined the Church Disrupted community yet, and you want to do that, you can do that for free by clicking on the SAI website link here in the description or here in the video. Also, that link is going to be in all of our social media platforms. So wherever you see us on social media, you can click the link in our bio there. And once you go there, just click on Church Disrupted and join the community, or scroll all the way down to the bottom. And in the bottom menu, you're going to see Join the Community, where you can join the community there. You can also join the community, as always, from disrupted.church, our website at disrupted.church. So the first thing we wanted to do, though, was we wanted to open up that community to you because we believe that the Church Disrupted community is going to be a place of incredible healing for you. One of the reasons why we started SAI is we wanted to be able to remove all paywalls from what we do. And here's the reason why. We can, as far as funding this work, it does take dollars, okay? It does take a lot of money. We could fund it through paywalls, having people pay for courses, having people pay for groups, having people pay for, community, pay for research, all those sort of things. Or we could go to a nonprofit donation model, okay? And we do the work that you all allow us to do as you give. One of the reasons why we went to the donation model was we wanted to remove all paywalls. The second reason that we went to the donation model was because as a nonprofit, we can actually do some things to, one, set the example for churches and other nonprofits. Two, the way we built this, it allowed us to build it with the most accountability in mind. And you're going to hear a lot about that from the questions that people have asked today, because a lot of you have questions about accountability. And that makes perfect sense, because how did we get here? We got here through being a part of a lot of churches and being connected to church leaders who did not have accountability. So we're not silly enough. I'm not silly enough to think that I don't need accountability. So from the very beginning, we wanted to do that, to bake in accountability. So if you haven't joined the community yet and you want to do that, make sure that you do that. That was the first thing we wanted to do with the launch of SAI. The second thing we wanted to do was we wanted to take time to answer your questions and to help point you to places where you can get more questions answered. We wanted you to feel comfortable before we ever ask for the first donation. So we've really not talked about donations. We've not talked about any of that yet. Through the month of May, we will be seeding the nonprofit, and we will be asking for donations to be able to get our budget where it needs to be to do this work. But we didn't want to do any of that before we first opened the community for free at no charge and began to just love on people, care for people, walk with people through their journeys. And the second thing we wanted to do is, again, give you a chance to ask questions about this, because we never want anybody to donate that doesn't feel 100% comfortable with what we're doing, with how we're doing it, and with the mission, okay? We want you to feel comfortable with any gift that you give. So today, let's go ahead. We're going to jump in. I'm going to pull it up right now. I'm going to pull up the list of questions, and a couple of things are going to happen. A lot of these questions have come from social media or through email. If you didn't know it, you can go to the Church Disrupted website or SAI, and you can email us. The best way to get in contact with us is through the SAI website, and contact us on there. Send us an email. Some of you may have tried to contact us on social, And from time to time, guys, we just miss those because of the volume that's coming in. But we can keep up with the emails a little better. If you have something really important you want to share, go ahead and send us an email. And if you're a part of the community, we always answer the community first. You can ping me there. You can get my attention. You can send me a DM there. That's always going to be easier to see than social media. But I do apologize if we've missed any message that you've sent us on social media. It's not on purpose. It's just sometimes the volume gets to be so much, it's really easy for us to miss one here or there. But a lot of these questions, they did come through social media. You're going to actually hear some of them. A couple of them are going to be recorded questions today. And you may say, how in the world did they do that? I want to leave a question like that where I don't have to think about it and type about it. I just want it, I want to record it and ask it. That's actually one of the things that you can do in the community. Again, you can join for free. There's no cost, but community members can leave us Q&A questions to answer on the podcast where you just, you click the button and you just ask the question and then it can be featured on the podcast. You're also going to hear today, unless people leave their name in the recording, even though I have their name, we're not going to share their name on the podcast because we just figure if you leave your name on the recording, you want us to share your name. And if you don't leave the name on the recording, then we're not going to share that. But we are going to hear from you, hear your voice, and answer your question. So if you want to leave a voice question for a future podcast episode, you can ask it for me, for any of our specific hosts, and we will make sure that question gets to them. If you want to do that, just make sure that you are a part of the Church Disrupted community. But let's go ahead and we're going to answer some questions. And really all we try to do was these have been separated into a few different categories. We're going to start out with a few missional questions, just big picture about SAI. Then we're going to talk about different categories like leadership and finances. Those are two big categories where people had a lot of questions. So we'll answer all those together. And then we'll just have kind of a smorgasbord of questions, including non-SAI related questions about healing from spiritual abuse, certain spiritually abusive or potentially dangerous situations in the church. We're going to answer those at the end as well. But let's go ahead. Let's jump in together and answer some of these questions. And if I don't do a good enough job, if you still have questions, send us those questions through the community. Send us those questions on social media. We will keep answering your questions about SAI because, again, we want you to feel comfortable about the work that we're doing with the Spiritual Abuse Institute. This is for you. This is for victims of spiritual abuse. This is for people who want to see spiritual abuse end. It's not for us. It's not to advance our bottom line. It's not to advance our station in life. Guys, this is to make a difference. It is for you. So the first question, we have gotten actually a lot variations of this question. What in the world will SAI do? What will the Spiritual Abuse Institute do? What will you guys be about? And really, what we're going to do is we're going to do three things and try to do those three things really, really well. Okay? But here's what those three things are, and they're all for one reason. Again, to build a future, to make a future where spiritual abuse is hard to hide. We want to combat spiritual abuse, limit spiritual abuse, and help people heal from spiritual abuse. But here's the three ways that we're going to do that. Now, the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to build awareness. We want to create awareness around spiritual abuse because for many of us, we had never heard the term. I don't know about you. I had never heard the term spiritual abuse until I started looking up things because I was going through it. Okay. I looked up the term spiritual abuse after I already had PTSD from going through spiritual abuse. I didn't know terms like spiritual abuse, or religious trauma. And that's something we hear a lot, especially on the community is I had never really heard about it, but I'd experienced it. And one of the things we hear a lot is that you guys are thankful that we've given you language for that, right? So we want to continue that awareness about spiritual abuse and religious trauma. We want to give awareness about what it is, awareness about how to recognize it, awareness about how to respond to it, awareness about all of those things. So awareness and education. Okay, education is going to be a part of awareness and part of the third part of our strategy, but we want to continue to build awareness about spiritual abuse, how to recognize it, how to respond to it, how to stop it, anything that we can do to help churches get better, to help churches get healthier, and to help people heal. That's what we want to do. Okay, we want to make sure that this is done well. So the first thing we're going to do, SAI, is about creating awareness. The second thing that we're going to do, we're going to do research. Because if you guys have looked this stuff up, there is not a ton of research that's out there on these things. Not just spiritual abuse and religious trauma. We're talking about research on how it affects you. We're talking about research on church systems that cause it, research on how it affects the kids of people who have been through spiritual abuse. So on all of those things, from the church system side to the people healing side, we want to focus on doing some really good, robust research that we're going to try to do it in a way that's going to withstand academic scrutiny. That's important to us, okay? We want to do some representative research that is going to help people, again, better understand spiritual abuse, how to heal from it, how to respond to it, the different things that we can do. So you're going to see that coming. There's not hardly anyone who is doing that. So in this space, we've got probably, 12 to 15 massive research projects that are already on the books that we want to do. We're going to do them as soon as we have the resources to do them. And they're going to be time consuming, right? So in a perfect world, we do all of them at one time. Realistically, though, it's probably going to be a few big research projects every single year. And we don't want to just do the research. We want to be able to share it broadly, okay? So that we can have spiritual abuse victims, that we can have therapists, we can have psychology experts, we can have pastors. Everybody can dig into this research as they want and as they need so that we can get better. Because when we have information, the better information we have, the better we can get, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, we want to continue to create awareness. We want to do research. I'm going to get a drink of water here. Excuse me. All right, and the last thing that we really want to do is we want to focus on resources. This is probably what's going to excite most of you. We want to start doing a lot more practical resources. And you're going to hear about some of these different projects, but everything from courses to groups, different things that we can do. We want to provide more resources for you to heal, okay? We want to provide more resources for your family and your friends that are still in church, haven't experienced what you've experienced, but they want to love you and support you, but they don't know how, okay? We want to do resources for them. And we also want to create resources for churches. We're going to talk about that dichotomy again here in a minute with one of the questions, but we want to provide resources for churches as well, especially church leaders who want to get better, who want to do this right, who want to make sure that their churches are healthy and safe spaces. Also, some of the resources are going to be there to help you and I to help churches expose the players that get in there, the bad actors that get into churches who are trying to do this the wrong way, okay? So some of these resources are going to be to help churches, others are going to be to help expose the bad actors that end up in our churches, because the earlier we expose them and remove them, okay, the earlier we respond to these things, the less damage that it's actually going to be done, okay? So those practical resources, those are going to be things that help you get better, get educated, and make better decisions towards your journey of healing or toward creating safe spaces today. So those are really the only three things that SAI does. We are focusing on creating awareness. Okay, we want to conduct research that is deep, that is broad, that is going to help everybody to do their part in combating spiritual abuse. And the third thing, we want to create really practical resources to help people heal, to help churches get better, all that sort of stuff. So that's what SAI does. We do awareness, research, and resources to help end spiritual abuse, combat spiritual abuse, and help people heal from spiritual abuse. Now, if you go to the website, we've got a much better mission statement than that. But today, guys, today's just a Q&A. I don't want to give you memorized mission statements, okay? I'm a business consultant by day. I could do that. That sounds really good. But if you're listening to this, likely you've already got some triggers from having people vision cast to you in a church. So we're not going to do that. We're going to talk. We're going to answer the questions you have. I'm going to try to be real. I'm not going to try to be polished and share all these fancy mission statements and stuff with you to vision cast for you. There's no manipulation here for people to give or volunteer or do anything. We just want to answer your questions, and we will invite you to partner with us, but there's zero expectation or manipulation there. We only want people to partner with us who say, yeah, I really believe in this, and I want to do that. Okay, so second question, will SAI be focused more on spiritual abuse victims or on churches? That's a great question. Okay, we talked about it a minute ago. We're going to focus on both. We really want to be focused probably about 60-40 Okay. It may move more toward 50-50 before we're done, but 60-40 right now. We want to be 60% focused on victims because the first thing we want to do is help you heal. Okay. We've all been victims around this table, our various hosts, most of our guests have been victims of spiritual abuse. So we care about you. That's always going to be half or a little more of what we do, but really close to half. Like I said, at least 40%, we do want the focus to be on churches. Because the only way that we can make a dent in this long term, the only way that we can end and stop spiritual abuse long term is to work with church leaders to create healthier churches, healthier systems. And a lot of that, guys, because humans are always going to human. We are all capable of doing some insanely bad crap, okay? So because of that, the only way that we're going to build healthy churches is we got to build systems of transparency and accountability that once those systems get in, one person can't just undo them. Okay, so that's a big part of what we're doing. One of the things that's really going to set SAI apart is that we are not only for victims and we are not only for churches. We believe that what we're learning is we're walking spiritual abuse victims through healing, through their healing journey. It's teaching us a lot about what it's going to take to build healthy churches, okay? And so we're going to start by working with pastors who want to work with us. Eventually, our work is going to intersect with a lot of those pastors that don't want to work with us. But with that question, are we going to be focused more on abuse victims or churches? We're probably going to be focused just a little bit more on victims. That's going to be our lean, but we're going to be real close to half and half on both because we think, again, we have to help both victims heal and churches get healthy if we're going to make the difference that we want to make, and we're going to see the future that we really want to see. All right, question. Let me find the next question. What kinds of programs will you have? This is a good one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull up too, not looking at you guys for a minute. I'm going to pull up a list because we've got more programs that we want to do, more things that we want to create than I can remember at this point. Because guys, this is not the Jeff Cochran show. This is much bigger than me. It's going to take more people than just me to get this done. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to read a lot of these. And the reason why I'm going to read them is because I don't want to just miss a bunch of stuff or forget a bunch of stuff. So let's go ahead and I'll just read some of these to you and I'll explain what they are. And again, if you have more questions, go ahead, send them to us, ask. One of the projects that I am most pumped about is actually a church project. It's a church project, though, that is going to help you. It's going to help you probably more than it's going to help churches. We want to start doing church safe certifications, and you'll hear more about that on the podcast. We've talked about it a little bit already. You'll probably hear about it on some shorts or some reels. But we want to start doing what we call church safe certifications. These church safe certifications are really going to be where we go in and we do an assessment that lasts a few days to a week with a church, okay? We can do that virtually or we can do that on site. But we're going to dive deep. We're going to dive really deep into their systems. We're going to dive deep into their finances. We're going to actually interview every single staff member of a church. So when we do an assessment, we have to interview every single staff member. So you may be asking, why does some take a couple of days and some take a week? Okay. It may take us a week or a little more to interview every staff member if it's a really big church, whereas that might take us half a day if it's a really small church. Okay. But we're going to look into their systems, their finances. We're going to interview staff members. We're going to do a bunch of different stuff. And we are looking deeply for all of the red flags that we have seen cause spiritual abuse. And we've got a grading rubric for this. You're going to see some of them in another one of the projects that we're actually going to launch quicker, okay, that is just for you. But there are certain red flags that we can't see unless we're on site, okay? So we're looking for all of those red flags, including the ones that most people don't know how to look for. And what we're going to do is when we get done with that assessment, we're going to give every church a grade. Okay, their grade, it's going to be like a grade in school. It's an A through an F. We've got pluses and minuses, okay? If you get a B or better, okay, a B minus or better, we will certify you as a church safe church. We're going to put that up on a website. And our goal, guys, our goal is to eventually have a church in every major city, in every major state that we can say, this is a safe church. If you want to find a safe church near you, you can find it. Now, we're not going to focus on their theology. We're not going to focus on, their type of worship. What we're going to focus on, though, is are these safe churches, safe places for you to re-engage if you've been hurt? Because you guys know, many of you know, if you've already been through spiritual abuse, one of the scariest things is going through it again. Because for many of us, if we go through spiritual abuse again too quickly, we may not ever re-engage with the church. Not because you don't love Jesus, but because the pain could be too much, okay? So we know how important it is to re-engage with a healthy church the first time you are coming back to church. That's what this is about. These church safe assessments are about finding these healthy churches and being able to point you toward those churches. So again, you're not just going to see the church, you'll see the letter grade. So for some of you, many of you, you're going to be okay going to a B- church. But if there's an A+ church in your area, you're going to go to that one. Others, you may say, I'm willing to drive a little farther to find an A-rated church rather than a B-rated church. If they're a C or below, C+ or below, they will not be rated church safe, but we will give them the reasons why, okay, and what we suggest that they do, the changes they make to become a church safe church, okay? Now, outside of that, the cool part is to remain church safe certified, we have to come back and spend, half a day to a day, maybe 2 days again, depending on the size of your staff. But we're going to come back and spend some time with you every single year to make sure that your church is still church safe certified. Okay. This isn't something where you can just pay to keep staying certified. We'll have some churches that donate to us because they enjoy the work, and then they don't get certified the next year and they get mad and stop donating. That's okay. Right. Our focus here is on making sure that we have and identify safe churches and that we make sure they stay safe continually. Okay, so I'm really excited. That's going to be one of our huge projects, but it's going to be one that's going to take a little while to get to just because there's so much that's going to be involved in those church safe certifications. So here are a couple of things that are going to help us in the meantime to help you to find some healthier churches. One of the really simple projects we're going to do early is we're going to do what we call the Trustworthy Church Pledge. Okay, the Trustworthy Church Pledge, we're just going to build an online pledge. We actually hope that is up by the end of June, okay, maybe by the end of May. We want to build a Trustworthy Church Pledge where churches pledge to take certain actions, to take a handful of actions that will make them more transparent, more accountable, more trustworthy. They can take that pledge online, but you can find if a church has taken that pledge. And then if you find a church that's taken that pledge that's not doing the things they pledged to do, let us know, and we will take them off of the website as a Trustworthy Church Pledged or a Trustworthy Church Pledged church, okay? So again, that's something where they identify and they say, we pledge to do these things. We will try to look and make sure that they're doing those things. But anytime we see they're not doing those things, we're going to take them off of the website. Again, this is not nearly as detailed as a church safe assessment, but it is a step in the right direction. Okay. Are they pledging to do some simple things to stay accountable and transparent? And simple things like, hey, we're going to put a detailed budget out on our website so people can see where the money is going. We're going to be at least as transparent as a 990 form for other secular nonprofits. That's going to be one of the things that they do. One of the pledges they're going to make is that they're going to send their staff through trauma training, things like that. We're working on it right now. I don't want to commit to anything because some things could change, but we want this to be a fairly simple pledge they can take, but simple steps that will make a huge difference, okay? One of the things that we're going to do as well, and then we'll move off of the church stuff for just a couple of minutes, but we're going to start doing something called red flag reviews. So if you don't maybe trust the Trustworthy pledge yet, right? Or we don't have enough of the church safe assessments done yet, we're going to start walking through on our YouTube channel different church websites, and we're going to walk through the red flags and the green flags, the good things that we look for when we're talking to abuse victims who are looking to re-engage the healthy church, because we get these questions a lot. Hey, Jeff, have you heard of Church A or Church B or Church X or Church Y? We're thinking about going there. Could you check it out for us? Well, we can't check out every church that someone asks us to check out. But what we can do is we can show you what we're looking for when we check out a website. Now, the same disclaimers that I would tell people when they ask me to do that. Hey, I can take a look at their website, but without actually being there, without doing a deep church assessment, We may miss something, but I can do my best to take a look and to help give you an idea of what they're about. So we're not going to say that a church is healthy or unhealthy. We're simply going to say, how many red flags does this church have versus how many green flags does this church have? We're going to give it a score, and that's going to give you a good idea of, hey, how safe of a church is this for me to re-engage with if I need to be really careful? Okay, and again, they may be a super safe church and get a bad score on that. We're just saying these are red flags that we have seen involved in a lot of spiritual abuse. We know you want to be careful, so we want to be careful as well. The coolest part about that, those red flag reviews are going to teach you what to look for, not only with yourself, but with your friends and with your family when you're engaging with a church. So if you're in a place where you need to be really careful, here are some red flags to look out for. And we start doing those red flag reviews, I think they're going to help a ton of people. Another one of the big projects, you guys have already heard about the community. We're going to keep pushing on the community. Over the next 4 to 5 years, we want to add 10,000 people to the Church Disrupted online community. We want that to be a place full of people who are healing together, walking together, where you can ask questions anytime. And you don't have to just wait on me or a podcast host because we're going to be on there. But you can have other people who have been through what you have been through to help you process these things. And this isn't just a bunch of people that are hurt. There are going to be people in the community, thousands, who would say, I feel like I'm pretty fully healed and I've re-engaged with the church and I've overcome my trauma. They're going to be able to help as well. They're joining the community not because they need help. They're joining the community because they know what it feels like to be in your shoes. Some of you may be listening right now and you go, I want to do that. I want to help people heal. We want to add 10,000 people to the Church Disrupted community. And one of the things I'm most excited about with the Church Disrupted community, this is, we have very limited space for this. This is one of the projects that I am just super pumped about. And then we'll start going through some really fast projects just to give you an idea, because we could talk for hours just about projects. But we want to start by August of this year. We want to start 12 table groups. And those table groups are going to be filled with 8 or less people. They're going to meet once a month for 12 months. Okay, 8 or less people meeting once a month for 12 months. And we are building an intentional curriculum right now for those table groups. How, over the course of 12 sessions with other like-minded people, what are the things that you need to do, the things you need to process, the questions you need to ask, the steps that you need to take? What are those things that you need to do most that we can do together in 12 sessions, give you a full month to process and to do these things in between sessions as well? What are the things that you need most to begin healing from spiritual abuse, to begin getting freedom from religious trauma? So we're working on a curriculum right now. We're about halfway done with the curriculum. And if you just did the half of the curriculum we're done with, I'm telling you, it would be transformative. We're taking things from all of our experiences. We're talking to psychological professionals. We're talking to counselors who aren't in psychology, doing it in other ways. We're bringing all of this stuff together to really try to help people heal and to heal in community. Again, 8 people max in those. So 8 times 12, I'm not great at math, whatever that is. It's going to be slightly under 100 people that we can take through in year 1. In year 2, we hope to be able to train some more instructors and be able to up that. But that's going to be application basis for those in our community. They can apply, and we're going to take that. The cool thing about it is it's really going to help people heal. The thing we want people to pay attention to, if you apply, make sure that you can commit to be there for the 12 sessions, okay? Because you're going to get the most healing if you are there. If you start missing a bunch of sessions, it's just not going to be nearly as helpful. But guys, we are psyched about that project, okay? Some other things that we're going to do, and I'll go through these pretty quickly, but we're wanting to create courses for church leaders, okay? Courses for church leaders and church staffs. We also want to create courses for spiritual abuse victims to help you heal, to help you process. Some courses for the families of victims. And we'll talk about a lot of the same stuff we talk about in table groups, but it'll be a lot more bite-sized, and it will be stuff that you can do on your own. Now, I believe that healing happens best with others, but we want to be able to slowly build courses that are going to help you to take this at your own pace if you're not ready for a group yet. We want to take, in year number 1, we want to take 100 pastors, if we can, through the Good Shepherd training program. And the Good Shepherd training program is kind of like a table group for pastors, where we take a handful of pastors through a group and we walk through what it means to be a good shepherd, to lead a staff well, to build a church, to lead a church, to oversee a church that protects people. So we're working on that curriculum right now as well. A few other things that we're looking at that we really want to do as soon as we can. We want to create a database that displays every church that we know that is known to use NDAs, okay? And we want to create an anonymous portal online where you can send us and report on churches that are using NDAs, okay? We're not going to bash them. We're simply going to put their name up and say this church is known to use NDAs. If they want to get their name off of the website, then they've got to contact us and make a commitment that we can see and believe in that they're going to stop using NDAs. That's going to help people to know, is the church I'm a part of using NDAs? What conversations do I need to have? This is going to be really helpful for people who are not only attending churches, but are thinking about maybe jumping on staff at a church. Do they use NDAs? We also want to develop and publish a spiritual abuse online assessment tool, right? So for people who think they're in a spiritually abusive situation, but they're not sure, and they say, I don't want to just be a complainer, but I feel like something's really wrong here, they can go through, they can take that assessment, do the online tool, and it's going to basically calculate based on how many things that they gave answers to that are spiritually abusive, how likely it is that they're in a spiritually abusive situation, right? That's just going to help people. It's not going to be perfect, but it is going to be something to help people to say, okay, I wasn't sure how bad these things were, but I've taken the tool and now I've realized, no, these things are not normal. These things are not things that should happen in a healthy church. We also want to create an anonymous abuse reporting form where you can just report abuse. It's anonymous. You don't have to put your name to it. But what it's going to do, it's going to help us with researching things like red flags, systems that are sparking spiritual abuse. It's going to help us research the markers of dysfunctional church environments. So we want to launch that tool and really get people to put in answers nationally and internationally so that we can do some pretty deep research on the subject. And as we do the research, we want to create a research map, first in North America, then globally, where you can see reported spiritual abuse cases in the U.S. That's not going to show the specific church, but it's going to show abuse cases by city and region and state so that we can get, again, an idea of across countries, everywhere that we go, where are the abuse hotspots? And then when we know what those are, we can start doing research into why are these areas spiritual abuse hotspots. Of course, we talked about research. We want to do a bunch of research projects. I'll give you just some of those, but again, there are tons. We want to do research into NDA use in churches to get a much better idea of how NDAs are used. We want to do research into narcissism and narcissistic leadership. We want to do some pretty deep research into church governance and pastoral accountability, nepotism in churches. We want to do research about the reporting mechanisms for spiritual abuse and religious trauma that churches have. What are the best reporting mechanisms? What aren't? What percentage of churches actually have a independent reporting mechanism where you don't have to report abuse potentially to your abuser or someone in power over you who wouldn't listen? We want to do research onto things like leadership succession. We want to do just a general spiritual abuse study that is nationwide to find out what people's experiences are. We want to do research into the effects of spiritual abuse and religious trauma on children, sermon plagiarism, all kinds of other things. Again, that list just keeps going right now. If you have some research you'd like to see us do, hey, feel free, go ahead, send it our way. And then a couple of other things, we want to be able to build as we can a recommended therapy partner network for pastors and people, right? Pastors and victims of spiritual abuse. We want to help people get therapy who need it with trusted therapists. And one day in a perfect world, to be able to have applications to subsidize that for victims of spiritual abuse and pastors who can't afford therapy but need it. We want to be able to provide mediation in spiritual abuse allegations with churches and victims. So, hey, instead of the church just deciding, hey, this is spiritual abuse or not, or the victim having to go on their own to talk to people in power, we want to provide mediators mediators who will sit down with the church and the victim, making sure it's a safe space to navigate that conversation. If reconciliation can happen, that is great. If it turns out it's bigger than reconciliation, it's an abusive thing that needs to be investigated, then the mediator would say that this needs to be investigated, right? So we want to help really stop those and bring peace to those initial allegations, okay? We want to be able to reconcile where reconciliation is needed, but we also want to be able to help identify the places where, hey, an independent investigation, it's going to be needed. Here's who we recommend to do that independent investigation. And then, of course, this is a big one that you guys are going to care about if you're watching right now. We want to do a lot more resource content on YouTube. And there's a ton more resources we're going to provide. We would be here all day if I talked about those projects. But again, we want to actually move in a perfect world when we get the funding where we can do it, because it takes so much time and editing time and production time and making sure that everything is created, right? We want to create a lot of additional resource content, helping you heal, answering a lot of your questions on YouTube. So again, in a perfect world, we'd like to get to where 4 to 5 days a week, we have content coming out for you, a lot of different content. But again, at least half of that content would be just resources in a perfect world to help you grow, help you heal, help churches, that sort of thing. So that's just some of the projects that we've kind of got on the docket that we'd like to do. I don't know how long that took, but that took way too long. So again, I would love to tell you every project that we're thinking about. There's way too many on the list, but those are some of the ones I'm most excited about right now. All right. Hey, let's move to the leadership questions. All of the next few questions, they're going to be about SAI leadership and accountability, kind of stuff like that. And the first one's a really good question. Okay. We had this sent, I think on Friday, maybe Thursday. It wasn't long after we launched SAI. But we got this message, and we got it a couple of times since. Will there be any women on the board? And we knew this question was coming. So if you look right now on SAI's website, the spiritualabuse.institute, if you look on it and you look at our leadership, you're going to see 4 middle-aged white men. One of those is me, and spoiler alert, I think I'll talk about this in another question and answer, but I'm not a voting member of the board. Okay, I'm the executive director, so I sit in those board meetings. I help draft the agenda. I don't actually get a vote, okay? And that's for accountability purposes. But right now, there's 3 guys on the board. And here's the reason why there's 3 kind of middle-aged white guys on the board. We wanted 2 local church pastors, okay? We wanted to start making sure we had church pastors who were trying to do this thing the right way, who have been through spiritual abuse, who have been around it, who could help us make sure that we are helping people heal, but we are not tearing down the church just to tear it down. Okay, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we thought that would be really balanced accountability. We also wanted a third board member, our board president, who could help us in some other specific ways. Like, he's in the insurance industry. There's a lot of things we need to do around stuff like that to get started, okay, where we needed business expertise as well. So all 3 of these guys help us get started. They understood how to do 501c3 paperwork, how to get nonprofit status, how to help us get all the things that we needed to get started that I didn't even know that we would need. So they were the right people to help us get started, and we wanted to start with a smaller board, okay? So we, at any time, are going to have 3 to 7 board members. Our goal is going to stay in the 5 to 7 range, but we needed at least 3. But we are adding, there's a note on the website right now, we're adding board members, and we hope by the end of September to have a full board of 7 people. Our next 3 board members, the goal is for those to be female board members. We've got one right now that we are recommending who is going to actually be coming on as a female board member who's going to be helping us in the areas of accounting and stuff like that to make sure that we stay financially above reproach. We've reached out to a couple of psychology professionals to be on the board who are also females to help us from that side. We've reached out to some people who can really help us on the research side. But again, if we have 7 board members, we want, at least 3 to be female, or 4 can be female as well. We want it to be as close to half and half as possible. So our goal is to get to 6 board members by September. and the next 3 board members to be female. So yes, there will be women on the board. That's something we're going to fight for. We don't want just a female perspective. We don't want just a male perspective. We want a well-rounded perspective, and we want a perspective that balances cultures. And I know that right now we don't have that. So that's something that we are looking for. We never want to be led by a board that doesn't represent genders and cultures and different perspectives. Okay, because that's going to make us better. So fantastic question. And yes, there will absolutely be women on the board and some incredibly smart women that we're inviting. So pray that they say yes. Okay, so right now what we're going to do, next couple of questions, let me see. The next couple of questions are going to come from a recording from one of our community members. I'm going to go ahead and play that, and then we'll answer those questions. So let's listen to this one.
Well, thank you for the opportunity just to ask some questions here up front. I'm really excited for your organization. I think there's a lot of hurting people that are looking for ways to heal. And of course, we can often be not the most trusting individuals, not because we don't want to be, but because we've been hurt, because we've been trusting. So my first question, I've got 2 primary questions. And, how are you going to choose your board members? That's kind of important to me. I think you need a variety of influence, but I also think you need a variety of input. And so that's important to me to know how you're choosing your board members. Second, I know any new organization needs a lot of support, not just financially, but physically and influentially. And how will your board members contribute to this? And will this be in detail in your bylaws?
Okay. So good questions. A lot of good questions there. Thank you so much. Again, that was actually a question that was left, a couple of questions that was left by one of our community members, because they can leave those audio questions if I can think. So let's start with the first question. And actually, before we start with the question, say that makes perfect sense. One of the things she said that was important was, hey, a lot of us in this community, we're going to have trust issues. There's a reason for that, and we completely understand that. So we're going to do our very best to be as above reproach as possible. Always feel free to ask us questions, okay? If you're not sure about something going on at SAI, ask a question. We are never going to get mad at you. We're going to give you the very best answer that we can and try to be fully transparent with you. That makes perfect sense. Her first question, though, was, hey, how will the board be picked? I believe that was the first question. So how will the board be picked? Our board is not going to be handpicked by me. Okay, the first 3 people, I did ask them to be on the board. We needed 3 people to be able to approve the bylaws, do all that sort of stuff. But even though I appreciate all of these men, and I would call some of them friends, none of these are my best friends. None of these are people that we're hanging out on a regular basis together. I think outside of business circles and stuff like that, I don't think with 2 of the 3, we've ever even been to each other's houses. Okay. So these are people that I trust. Okay. But again, these are not like family members, best friends, anything like that. All right. Outside of those 3, okay, all future board members are going to be decided by the board. So they need to be recommended by a board member. Okay. That could be the chairman, president. It could be anything like that. I can recommend somebody, but then the board has to do a confirming vote, and I don't get a vote. So even if I recommend somebody, they can get voted down. Another place where we're getting recommendations is when we ask someone to think about being on the board to submit their name, and they say we can't do it right now. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they don't want their name attached to Spiritual Abuse Institute in this season. They can tell us of other people in their industry who they think would be good for us, and we'll take those recommendations. So, for instance, we've got a board member right now that I need to submit for confirmation. We need to sit down and have a conversation with them, and then the board, the existing board, will decide whether to bring them on or not. But this is an incredibly smart woman, has a lot of expertise, like I said, in accounting and things like that with businesses and nonprofits. But this is a person that I don't know personally. They were recommended to me, by someone in that industry that I trust, but I don't know them. So again, the board is not going to be filled with friends and yes men. And if anybody wants a recording of this, you can get it. But in the recording in the minutes of our very first meeting, our board president said, if you wanted yes men, you would not have asked me to do this. Okay. You're also going to see, I don't have a vote in these things. So the board is going to pick the board. We're picking board members based on, one, their passion to help people heal from spiritual abuse and their expertise. Okay. So for the most part, that's it. We're looking for people with certain expertise to help us steer the ship in the right direction. Okay. And again, whether that's having pastors to make sure that we don't go too far in one direction, having business owners, having, people who could help us with research, who are in the psychology or mental health industry, people who are in accounting. We're really going to be asking people for expertise to help us in areas where we feel like we need the help. And then once the board is full, we actually can also bring on ex officio board members, which simply means they're advisors who would sit in the board meetings but wouldn't vote. They wouldn't have a vote. And so if we need people to advise us in other areas, we can bring them on as an ex officio board member, or we can put a committee together. So let's say we didn't have an attorney on the board, but we needed legal advice. We could do it potentially that way. But yeah, the board is going to be picked based on their passion for this, based on their area of expertise. The other thing is they're going to be picked for their willingness to be able to push back on me. So anybody who is too close to me will not ever be able to be on the board, because they have to be able to push back on me as the founder and the executive director, because the board has an eject button. I'll be totally honest. We built this into the bylaws. You can look at those on our website. They have a couple of different eject buttons. They can get rid of me at any time. The spiritual abuse is not Jeff Cochran's. The spiritual abuse is much bigger than me or you or any of us, right? So I think that's a great question. The board will pick the board. They have to be nominated by an existing board member. We do take recommendations from other people who have turned us down. And then they have to be confirmed by a majority vote of the board. The other question she asked was really good. How will the board support you? And is it in the bylaws? Yes, it's in the bylaws. And the bylaws are made public. If you go to spiritualabuse.institute, again, linked in the description here, linked in our bios on social. If you go to our website, scroll down to the bottom, you'll actually see one of the links at the very bottom in the footer is our bylaws. You can check those and it will show the last date that they were changed. So right now it says they were approved and last edited on April 15th. That was when we had our first board meeting. Okay. But as specifically how the board will support me, in the bylaws, it talks about what the different officers do and the board does. One, any big decision we make, they have to vote on. And I don't get a vote, they vote. The other thing is they support me with accountability. So if we have content that they feel like is out of line, they can ask me to pull that down. Okay. If we're going in a direction with something or a project that they don't think is online with the mission, they can put a stop to that. But also they provide a lot of financial accountability, a lot of organizational accountability. So everything from our Google Drive, where we house a lot of our documents, to our bank accounts, everything else, all of the board can see that at any time. They don't have to ask me. They've actually got access to that at any time. Again, they're going to support us not just through their connections in the community, stuff like that, but they're going to support us with their expertise. As we run into a lot of different obstacles and stuff, they're going to share their lens, how they see it through their different levels of expertise. And we're all very, very different. So I'm super thankful for our board, but I'm really excited about where our board is going and the people that we hope, fingers crossed, that we're going to be able to add very, very soon. Another question around that that I wanted to go ahead and answer is we've had somebody ask on social media, will family or friends be able to be on the board? The answer to that's no. If you check those bylaws again, on the SAI bylaws, we have a very specific anti-nepotism policy. So for instance, my wife is a therapist. She cannot be on our board. Okay. She could be a committee member. She could be an advisor. She can't be a voting member of our board because she's related to me. Okay. And it's not just nepotism in a relationship. It's any like really close friends. So again, a lot of our podcast hosts would not be able to be board members because we're close. We got friendships. We've been around each other for a while. And we don't want to put anybody on the board that is a very close friend or family to any of us. That doesn't just go for me, but no family members or close friends, acquaintances, business relationships of our existing board members could actually be on the board. So we're trying to be really careful about that. Another board question that we get a lot, will board members be paid? And the answer to that is an emphatic no. But there are a couple of places where they may be paid that we do want to let you know. So if you're talking about like a salary, no, the board members aren't going to be paid. The only time a board member should be paid is if they're getting reimbursed for something they paid out of their pocket. So for instance, right now as we sit today, we don't have enough donations coming in because we haven't asked for donations yet. Today's really the first day we're doing that. We don't have enough money in donations to pay for our insurance. So one of our board members or myself would have to pay for our insurance. So when we get donations that come back in, we will get reimbursed for that, right? Or let's think about to incorporate in the state of Tennessee or to file the 501c3 paperwork for nonprofit status. We paid for all of those. So when money is available, we could ask for a reimbursement. They could also, a lot of those things are just going to be donated, but we could ask for reimbursement. We will pay reimbursements for related business expenses for the nonprofit, but we will not pay salaries. That's also another reason why I am a non-voting member of the board, because as the executive director, you guys know, you see me in all of this. Myself and my company, we've done a lot of this stuff. We have footed the bill for this stuff for the last year. So we're going to be doing a lot of the work. So any contract labor, so if we're working on a project, we're working on, editing a podcast, something like that, I can be paid for that. My company could be paid for that, but we can only be paid for completed work. And we're going to talk about that here more in the finances thing. So I can't be paid a salary, but I can be paid for projects. But because I'm doing a lot of the work and will be paid at times for some of that work, that is why I'm not a voting member of the board. We will not be paying our board members. Let me look at the next question here. These have been a lot of good questions so far, by the way, guys. How am I doing? Are we answering them well? I hope so. But the next question is, how will Jeff be held accountable so that SAI doesn't fall into the same abuse of power situations as churches ran by a single lead pastor? That's a very good question. That's one we care a lot about. I'm going to be held accountable, as well as anybody else in our organization, by that board and our bylaws. So the board holds me accountable, and the bylaws are big guardrails that can't be changed without board approval and a full board vote that I can't be a part of, okay? So the board and the bylaws, they keep me accountable. We've already talked about it quite a bit, but the board can ask me to do anything at any time. The board can stop something that I'm doing. The board can remove me. The board can dissolve the organization, okay? The board can replace me. So my accountability is to the board and to the bylaws. That's why we wanted to make those bylaws public as well, so that you could see all that. So for instance, we just talked about a minute ago, I'll be paid for some of the projects that I do. I can never write myself a check. I can't do any of that. Anything that comes to me financially has to be signed off on by 2 officers, okay? And it's presented all my payments at the next board meeting. Okay. There's also, if you look at the bylaws, there's compensation limits that we have. They've already set the number of exactly what I'd get paid. And if anybody wants to ask, we're full open book with that. It is lower than we will pay any contractor on purpose to be above reproach. So there's a limit to what I can get paid per hour for any project that I do. There's also a compensation limit, a limit on how much I can make, my businesses, any of it all together. And that's not just with me, that's with any contractor, okay? But those are the ways that the board is going to be holding me accountable, okay? They're going to be looking at every single thing that we spend, everything that we do. They have an open line to the books. So there's nothing that I can do without their permission, and nothing can come back to me without them signing off on it, approving it, and that sort of thing, okay? Also, again, anything that we're doing with SAI that is not advancing the mission, they are going to make sure that we stop it or that we change it to where it advances the mission. So anyway, I think that answers the question, hopefully. So let's talk about finances, because that's a question that people always have. We bled into it a little bit already. Anytime you give to a nonprofit, especially if you've been part of a church, we pick on churches all the time for financial issues. You guys know, Church Disrupted, we pick on churches about financial issues, financial transparency. So we're doing everything that we can to set the example in this area. If you look at our values on our website, one of our values is that we do set the example. We want to set the example for what a nonprofit or church should look like financially. So how will the money be spent? Our goal is for 100% of every dollar given to be spent directly advancing the mission of SAI, directly combating spiritual abuse, helping you guys heal, helping churches get healthy and create healthy systems. So we're intentionally keeping our overhead super low as possible. We don't have offices. Okay, like where I'm at, this is my office at my house. We have a conference room that's been donated by another board member. We have meeting rooms, okay? We don't pay for those things. We're not paying salaries. We're not doing all that. We'll get into more of that here in a minute. But we're keeping our overhead as low as humanly possible so that money is only being spent directly on these projects to advance the mission, okay? And then we're going to give good financial reports at the end of the year so that everybody can see the projects that we did, what money was spent, what bucket it was in, and things like overhead. Guys, we're talking about insurance, money that we have to pay to the government to actually be set up as a nonprofit organization. We're talking about stuff like that. It is stuff that we are legally required to have. And everything else, we're trying to keep this thing as shoestring as possible because we want 100% of every dollar to go directly toward the mission. And that's why we say that, because even though we can't make the overhead zero, the only overhead that donations are paying for is the overhead that is required for us to be an organization. So that's very important to us. You will know if that ever changes, but it is very important to us to be able to say and stand by 100% of every dollar donated will go directly to the mission of combating spiritual abuse and helping people heal. So one question we had about the finances as well, we got this quite a few times. Hey, how much money do we need for budget? How much money are we going to need to operate this first year? I don't think it's a ton, but if you've never ran an organization, this may sound like a lot, probably won't, but we're going to need, based on our best estimations right now, and you can see the budget online. So if you go to financial reports, you can see the budget, you can see what we spent already. We're like $1,500 or something like that in the negative right now because we haven't taken any donations. But I believe it's $36,000. You can look at it again, double check me on the budget, but I believe it's $36,000 is what we estimate that we need for this first year to be able to do some significant projects. I'm still going to be donating a lot. Some of our board members have donated some stuff. My company's still going to donate a good bit of time because we know we're not going to have the money to just pay for everything. But we think with $36,000 that we could accomplish a lot of these projects. And again, we can keep that budget low because we're not paying salaries. We're not going to pay, not just salaries, but we're not going to have to pay, different employment taxes and stuff like that would come along with having employees, benefits, all that sort of stuff. So $36,000, I believe, is the total budget. Also, we've been getting the question, are donations tax deductible? Yes. We don't have our final approval from the IRS yet for our 501c3, but it's submitted. If there's a problem, they should let us know what the problem is and we will fix it. But because that's been submitted, once they approve it, everything will backdate, which means that every donation will be tax deductible. And we'll let you guys know when that is fully approved as well. But again, it's going to backdate. We're just waiting to hear back from the IRS right now. Who controls the finances and what's the financial accountability? So the board controls the finances. The treasurer has a bit more responsibility with the finances to make sure that all the numbers are in line. But the board as a whole votes, approves, and reviews the finances at every single meeting. Again, they can see the bank accounts in real time. So they control the finances, and I have to have an officer sign off on anything that's over, I can't remember what the limit is right now, but over like a pretty small limit. I have to have officers sign off on it anyway, including our recurring expenses. So financial accountability, the board is going to look at our expenses, our P&L statements, all of that, every time that we meet. They have real-time access to all of that. Again, we're trying to add some board members who have a lot of experience in the finance realm. But you're also a big part of our accountability. If you go to the website right now, you look at the financial reports, you see our budget, you see what we've taken in year to date, which is 0, because we've intentionally, again, up to this recording, not asked for donations. But you're going to see what we've spent. You're going to be able to see kind of our net at any time. We're going to do that every single month of the year. We're going to give you an annual report that is that detailed or more detailed. Also, at the end of the year, we'll be filling out a 990 that shows, including, okay, this isn't just salaries because we don't do salaries. Since we don't do salaries, you'll actually see on the 990, I believe, if you don't see it there, we're going to put it on the website, anything that I've made. As a contract worker, anything has been reimbursed to our board, our biggest contracts, what we spent there. You're going to be able to see a full breakdown of the budget in that 990 as well as on the website. And our reports may be, likely will be more detailed than the 990. So you're going to have the monthly reports, the annual report, the 990, and then we'll do, I can't remember exactly how often, but we will be doing audits. Okay. I think that's one of the things we're still figuring out is when we're doing that. We can't do an audit right now because we don't have any money to do the audit and we don't have any money to audit. But we will be doing regular audits as well and putting those up on the website. So I believe that is everything. The board is my financial accountability. You are our financial accountability through the annual reports, the monthly reports, the 990s, and then we're going to do independent audits for outside accountability as well. What percentage of the budget will be used for payroll? Got that as a question. And again, I think I answered that a minute ago. That's a big goose egg. 0 payroll. We're not paying salaries. We will only pay contract workers for projects completed, work completed toward the mission, and they will get that payment when the work has been completed so that we are not wasting any money whatsoever. We've had the question, can we give the specific projects? That's a great question. Yes, you can. I don't know if there's a note right now on DonorBox, which is the platform that we use. But if you want to give to a specific project at any time, if you can't put the note in on DonorBox, if you can't, go ahead and do that. If you can't, go ahead and just shoot us an email with the contact form saying, here's my name. I just donated. Here's what I want it to go to. And if you designate that, your gift will not go to any project other than the one that you wanted to put it toward. So if you said, hey, I don't want this to go toward making any sort of content, I want this to go toward church safe assessments, we can make sure we do that. All right. Next question. What percentage of donations will go to overhead? We've already answered that as well. I don't think we answered that specifically. I don't know that specifically. We're still waiting back on tear back on a couple of overhead pieces, like insurance, what those final costs are going to be annually. But that will be an extremely low percentage of what we're bringing in. We're keeping it as low as possible. The overhead and be as low as possible. What kind of financial reports will SAI provide to donors? Will they be public? Again, I think we answered that already, but I'll circle back around to it. We're going to have a monthly financial report, real time on the website. We're going to do an annual report for our donors that will also be publicly accessible on the website. We're going to fill out the 990 in the most detailed way that we can. That'll be annual. All of those will be public and they'll be provided to donors as well. And then the last financial question that we've had, and again, we've already got people who have asked about this. We've kind of been waiting to try not to put this out there publicly a ton, but how can I donate? If you say, hey, I really want to support SAI, I want to support the work you're doing. Some of these projects have really excited me. I want to support the community. I want to support more of the content we've already been seeing. I want to make sure that we keep that content going. Anything like that. If this has resonated with you and you want to donate, or you know of friends and family who may want to donate, the only way that we do donations right now, in general, is going to be through the website. Okay, so if you go to spiritualabuse.institute, again, it's linked in the description here. It's on all of our social media and our bios. But if you just go click on the Give tab and you can give, that'll be through a secure portal. If you give recurring, like you can make an account and see what you've given, even if it's not recurring. But if you give recurring, you can make an account on there. You can change it at any time. So let's say you said, hey, I really want to I want to give $30 a month, and that's a specific number. I'll explain why in a minute. You say, hey, I want to give $30 a month. 3 months in, something changes, you lose your job. You don't have to ask us. You don't have to do anything. You can just log onto your account, and I think in like 1 or 2 clicks, change that. You can change the amount. You could stop donating, anything like that. You have full control over what you give. But yeah, that's the best way to donate. If you would say, Jeff, I just don't feel comfortable giving online, you can give in certain circumstances through a check. You would just need to reach out to us through the contact form on the website to get that address of where you would need to send the check. But again, we try to do as much of it online as possible, just because then there's fewer people handling checks. There's less checks and balances that we need. It just helps us to keep everything accountable. But those are the 2 ways that you can donate. The number 1 way is online. Now you may be asking, hey Jeff, you said like $30 a month, and that was important. Why? We said a little bit ago, someone asked the question, how much money does SAI need to be funded? Our estimation is that we need about $36,000 to be funded minimally for this first year. So one of the things that we're asking people to do, that would be 100 donors who gave $1 a day. $30 a month, $1 a day. If 100 donors committed to giving $1 a day, we'd hit our budget right here in May. That's our goal. We really want to hit our budget by the end of May. That's the minimum budget we need to keep the content coming at you and to begin working on these projects. So again, if you're saying, hey, Jeff, what's the best way that we can support you? We appreciate all support. But if you're asking, hey, where do we need support most? We're looking for 100 donors who will give $30 a day. But it doesn't matter whether you can give $30 a day or you can give a $5 one-time gift, a $1 one-time gift, a $100 one-time gift. It doesn't matter. Every single gift helps. Every gift is going to help us to get there and make sure that we are continuing to do this work. The only reason why we're using that 30 or 100 people to give $1 a day, $30 a month, is because it's kind of a simple number that a lot of people can hit. But also, if we had enough people doing that recurring, the more people that do that recurring $30 a month gift, and again, you can give more, you can give less, but those recurring gifts help us to plan, because we know that money is coming in, and if someone cancels, we'll see that. One-time gifts, it's a little harder to plan on like a project, because we don't want to get started on a project because we have the money for it that month, only to find out that for the 6 months of the project, we don't have enough to get us all the way to completion. So again, it's easier to forecast that out if we have those recurring donations. So, but you can donate online. Again, we're looking for 100 people who could donate $1 a day. That's $30 a month. But any gift, one-time recurring, doesn't matter how big, how small, it's going to help. We just appreciate you guys. Anybody who donates, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you. And if you don't feel called to donate, that's okay. If you can't donate, that's okay. You can still join the community. You can still take advantage of every single thing that we do. Nothing's hidden behind a paywall. The only extra thing that a donor is going to ever get, that someone who isn't a donor isn't going to get, donors may find out about anything that big affecting the organization. They may find out first. But other than that, we're going to do 1 to 2 donor calls every single month, where we have a call that's just for donors to ask questions, to share concerns, stuff like that. So it's going to be a pretty chill community call with me. That's the only call, the only thing that's going to be just for donors. And again, it's because we want to make sure they have a place where they can be heard and it doesn't get caught up just in the crowd. So, but that's the only special thing we're doing for donors. So I don't want you to feel any pressure that if you love what we're doing, but you can't support it through a donation, you're not in that place, that is totally okay. There's zero pressure, but if you can, we're also grateful for that. All right, so let's get out of, we've done leadership finance. These last questions are just that smorgasbord of questions about SAI and a few questions just about spiritual abuse in general, religious trauma, and navigating situations. So one person asked, I think is a really good question, will it be, talking about SAI, will it be too triggering for those who have been affected by spiritual abuse? In general, I would say no, but in some specific situations, probably yes. But that's also been the case with Church Disrupted. There are certain topics we talk about where we give extra trigger warnings and say, this may be too difficult for some of you. Some of the research may trigger some things, but for the most part, I don't think it will be too triggering. Most of what we do is designed with your healing in mind, okay? So if it's something that we do believe may be too triggering, we're going to do our best to give you that heads up. But also, I want to give you permission. If you ever see anything or hear anything that feels triggering at all, feel free to stop watching that video or reading that piece of research or that resource. You can support us and love 90% of what we do and say on 10% of it, hey, that's not for me. That's too hard. Okay. Your health is always, right? You being healthy is always our first priority. So, but I don't think that most of our content is going to be too triggering. It's going to be very similar. We're just going to be able to expand what we do, add the research, add the resources. Another person asked, is Church Disrupted part of SAI or something like totally different? Church Disrupted and SAI are the same, but Church Disrupted is really, as far as the podcast, that is a part of the podcast and the community. It's a part of SAI, but it's not all of SAI. But because so many people know us on social media as Church Disrupted, you'll see it in our bylaws that are listed on our website. Church Disrupted is actually our assumed name as well. So we can do business as the Spiritual Abuse Institute or Church Disrupted. So really, they're one and the same. But if you're talking about the podcast or the community specifically with that branding, that's just a small part of SAI. But really, you can use Church Disrupted and SAI interchangeably. But the podcast hosts and stuff, I think it's important to know, all of us that are working on the podcast, we are volunteers when we're hosting this stuff. We may say something at some point that doesn't represent the views of the Spiritual Abuse Institute. If we do, I'm probably going to hear about it pretty quickly from the board. We may have to apologize for that. We may have to do that. But again, they our podcast hosts and stuff are volunteering in that area of SAI. And when we're talking about stuff, again, there's always that chance probably going to happen where somebody's going to say something. So our views don't necessarily, the stuff that we say on the podcast, that's not always the views of the Spiritual Abuse Institute. But part of what the Spiritual Abuse Institute is trying to do is start a lot of honest conversations. So they'll be honest, but from time to time, we may have to come back and say that is not the view of SAI. We got a couple of questions on different places. Will you come to Australia? Can SAI come to New Zealand? Will SAI work in Canada? I think there's a few more countries there. We're going to start right now. Our focus is North America. So the United States, Canada. If there's potential work to be done in like Mexico or something like that, we could do it. But right now, the United States and Canada is where we're hanging our hat. And that's simply just because it's where we live. But we're not going to turn down opportunities in like New Zealand or Australia or something like that. What I will say is for anything that's on site, like church safe assessment, stuff like that, we will not be paying for any sort of travel out of our current budget until the budget is much larger and until we have people giving to a travel budget from other countries like that. We're not going to be spending money on plane rides and stuff like that. So we are willing to serve in any other country that we can, as long as we can serve in a virtual way. And that's just to, again, protect our donors. Right now, there is not enough money to be there's not enough money to be spending it flying people around the world for different things. So I hope that comes across in the right way. But I don't want anybody to wonder, when you are donating, you are not donating for me to get on a plane and go somewhere. I'll give you an example of this. My wife and I are probably going to go to the Restore conference this year in Phoenix, Arizona. It is a conference about spiritual trauma, right? It's a conference about spiritual abuse. Julie Roys and the Roys Report puts it on. If I don't take my wife, I'm going to take someone else from SAI, but SAI is not going to pay for my plane ticket. I'll pay for my plane ticket. SAI might pay for me to go to the conference, pay for that ticket. But again, we're on such a shoestring budget right now. I want donors to know that they're not giving to plane tickets. So the answer to that question is yes, we'll serve in any country that we can, as long as it is virtual. We can only, because of financial constraints right now, serve physically in Canada and the United States, North America. Okay. somebody asked, who's the community for? Like, what is the community like, and who is it for? The community's on Discord. So we use the Discord app. There's places for you to tell your story. There's places for you to ask questions. There's a theology and Bible chat where we talk about theology and Bible stuff if you want. There's places for you to tell your story publicly as well as anonymously. It's where we post a lot of different announcements. There's a place on there for you to leave like audio questions, like you've heard one of already today. On the community, you can ping separate people. So you can just ping us with our tag, me or any of the podcast hosts, to get our attention. You can DM us. There's a running community chat where most of the conversation happens, where, again, you can share stories, ask questions, talk amongst each other, as well as asking us questions and stuff. So that's how the community works, though. And it's for anybody who wants to heal or help people heal from spiritual abuse. We are really quick on the trigger, though. If anybody's trying to troll, argue, be like super negative or anything like that, we're just going to let that go, because we want it to be a safe place. Okay. So if that happens, we're going to cut people pretty quick. We've not had a single problem with that in the community so far. We know we will, but it's a safe place. So if you want to heal from spiritual abuse, you want to be around other people who've experienced the same things you have, you want to have a safe place where you can ask questions, get other people's perspectives. That's what the community is for. And then the table groups will be through the community. The table groups are actually going to be happening on the community. And with the community, another thing that we're going to do is we're going to be doing, probably starting with some audio calls and then going to some video calls as well. But we're going to do community chats, probably at least a couple of times a month, but just some random community chats where I'll jump on. Anybody else who wants to hop on, or me and one of our hosts, anybody who wants to hop on, we'll just chat and we'll talk about anything that you want to do in one of those chat rooms. So that's what the community's like. I think it's pretty cool so far. We get some really cool people in there. And again, we want to keep adding to where there's about 10,000 people who are in that community. And really at any time you got people who you can talk through this stuff with. Another one of the questions, will there be resources on the website that we can share with others? Things like how to respond to victims of spiritual abuse, how churches should respond, should people forgive unrepentant pastors, stuff like that. Yes, there will be. There's not yet. As we get the funds and time available to be able to do that, we want to do kind of a really robust FAQ section. And the FAQ section will have linkable resources all throughout. So we'll do like an FAQ section with linkable resources, videos, all that sort of stuff for people. How do I respond if a family member's been through spiritual abuse? We'll do the same thing for, I've been through spiritual abuse. What do I do? Right. We want to do a few different sections like that. Again, it's just going to take time. Whether we get to that this year really depends just on funding, and how quickly we get to that just depends on funding. Because again, right now it's not one of the main projects that's on the list, but that is something that is on our list that we want to do. Another question, how can we help? Do you need volunteers? Yes, we need volunteers. We don't quite know where we need volunteers yet. So we're going to need a lot of volunteers when it comes to research stuff. And we have to start interacting with churches and asking churches direct questions. We may have some volunteers who can help us with stuff like that. Having people in the community that say, hey, I'm going to volunteer just to be on in certain shifts, or I'm going to be volunteer just to check it often and make sure people are connected with. Stuff like that would help. But right now, everything's so new, we're trying to figure it out. We will have volunteering opportunities for you all. But again, those are just places, only volunteer if you want to volunteer. We're going to have limits on that. We don't want anybody having to put a lot of time into this because, again, we want to protect you from the kind of exploitative practices that we've seen in a lot of churches. So if you want to volunteer and you want to help, stay tuned. We'll have some things coming down the pike soon, but we don't have a ton of details on that yet, just because we're trying to figure out what projects can we pursue, what do we have to put on the shelf, and again, all of that depends on funding. So until we know what our funding looks like and if we're going to have the budget, we don't know what projects we can do. But if you want to volunteer, stay tuned. We will have information on that. Somebody asked, will this change the podcast? For the most part, no. The only thing this will do to change the podcast, it's going to be changes for the better. Like as the community grows, we'll probably have more questions from the community on the podcast. Again, we won't have tons of podcasts that are just like this. And usually this type of episode will be Q&A about random stuff, not SAI. But we will make some small changes like that. But no, for the most part, the podcast is going to stay the same. We just want to be able to start putting out a lot more content outside of the podcast, especially resources to help with healing. Another person asked, how soon will we start seeing new programs and resources? Again, you're going to start seeing those fairly immediately. By the end of May, you're going to start seeing some new stuff come out. How much you see and how fast it comes out, again, that just depends on how quickly we're able to hit budget. And if we're not able to hit budget, how close we're able to get, how quickly. Again, if we hit the full 36,000, then we'll be able to put more out soon. If we go above the 36,000, we'll be able to surprise you guys with a lot more. But let's say we got 10,000 or 5,000 in support by the end of May, then we just got to look and say, what projects can we do for the amount of money that we have? But regardless of which project that is, you should start seeing some new programs and resources by the end of May. And our May program and resources opening up the community to everybody. And then kind of every month, we're going to try to bring out at least one new resource or program as funds allow. Hopefully, you're going to start seeing some more content. Again, that's as funds allow, because there's so much time that has to go into editing and producing content. But we'd love to get to 3-day-a-week content cycle and getting some resources and reactions and stuff like that out. Because there's a lot of news that you guys want us to react to. And sadly, we just can't react and respond and talk about all the news that's going on simply because of time. We're hoping that we can actually get to that very soon. We also had here, so here's another, we just got a couple of questions left, and these are not really about Spiritual Abuse Institute. So let's go ahead and listen though. We had someone from our community who's on church staff who had a question about how to navigate a specific situation on church staff. So let's listen together.
A couple years ago, our senior pastor and executive pastor were replaced with other pastors on staff. When these guys came up, their goal was to change the culture for the staff because it had been extremely toxic. They brought me in to help. And then a few weeks ago, I found out that I was no longer going to be helping with no clear explanation as to why. Recent events have not helped the situation. Staff still feels undervalued. They still feel afraid for their jobs. They still don't trust leadership. But when I spoke with the senior pastor last week, he's under the impression that the culture is on the up and up. Unfortunately, if you ask any of the lower level staff, that is not the case. So how can I have a conversation with him to drive this point home in a way that he feels like I'm there to support? I'm not there to cause problems.
Yeah, it's a good question. So sounds like this community member, they're on staff. They were brought onto the staff to help kind of change a culture, build a healthier culture, and got blindsided by the fact that they're not going to be working in the same role anymore. So honestly, I would approach it that way. You got to be really careful with senior leaders in churches because, and again, this isn't bagging on senior leaders in churches. A lot of times those leaders have been mistreated. They've had people, do things to hurt them. So we put that kind of wall up that leads to a lot of spiritual abuse. We put it up at the beginning just to protect ourselves. Okay. I've been there. So that's why I say we. So I just be really careful how you have that conversation. Let them know at the very beginning, hey, want to have a conversation about this, but I want you to know it's all in support. It's all in honor. It's all in love. But I think I would approach it with, hey, it sounds like my role is changing. It sounds like I'm not going to be helping with the culture stuff quite as much anymore. So I wanted to do two things if I could. One, can I get clarity from you on what you envision my role being going forward? How can I serve the church best? I want to be clear and make sure that I'm serving the way you envision. Okay. I think your leader is really going to respond well to that because leaders like it when people are clear generally. Okay. And you're not fighting back against the role change as much as you're saying, it sounds like this is happening. Is that true? Am I hearing that right? If I am, how do you envision my role? Now, what that also does, though, it gives them a chance to cast a really solid vision for you. I would listen. I would hear them out. If you don't like the role, that lets you know so that you can process it with potentially family and friends and decide if you want to stay in that church staff role for a long time. But it gives them a chance to tell you what do they see your role being, okay? The other thing that I would ask is outside of clarity for the role, I would say, okay, given that our role is changing, I also wanted to give you a debrief of what I know and where I see the culture standing as I finish out this role. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't just stop doing this without making sure you had all the information, just because I know it's really hard to lead without all the information. So I'm going to give you the information that I have. If that's okay, you can do with it whatever you feel like you need to do with it. I just want to pass this off well. Again, most leaders are going to take that. They're going to hear that. And they're going to be pretty excited. You're wanting to finish this well. You're wanting to pass this off well. Positioning it that way, I think they're going to be more willing to hear it. Now, the content, again, that's uncomfortable. They may not like it, but you're saying do with this what you will. And I think that's where I would share, hey, from my conversations, my last bit of work on this, my understanding and perspective, my perception is that staff are still struggling. Staff are still fearful. Here's why. Give them that information. And that's a good place to share. Here were going to be the recommendations I was going to give you before you asked me to step out of this role. So I'll give you those recommendations. You, again, don't have to take them, but I wanted to at least let you know these are some things I think that could be helpful. And then just ask, hey, do you have any other questions? Is there anything else that I can do to hand this off well? A couple of things are going to happen in this. One, you're going to get to hear what they envision your new role being. It's going to let you know if you want to stay or not. The other thing is how this pastor responds to you very easily sharing your perceptions. Do they get defensive? Do they ignore it? Do they do something about it? Do they ask you questions and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know people were still feeling that way. Can you tell me more? Whether it's good or bad, their response is going to let you know how much they actually care about creating a healthy culture. There are leaders who deeply care about creating healthy culture. Those are leaders you want to work for. There are also leaders who come in to fix cultures and they just care about fixing the culture enough to look good, to say they did it, to check off a box. If that's the case and they know that the culture is not fixed, but they're okay just checking off that box, it's probably a good sign that the culture is going to slowly drift back into toxicity. Okay. The good news is both of those answers or both of the responses are going to let you know whether this is a safe and healthy place for you to be and continuing serving and doing ministry. That I don't know how they'll respond, but I do think that's the safest way. That would be my recommendation. If I was doing it, I think that's the safest way to respond and still try to protect the church staff as much as you can, but coming at it in a really honoring way that is hoping for the best, and then you'll respond if it's not. Anyway, I really hope that helps. Those situations are complicated, so if there's anything else I could do, just reach out, let me know. And I would love, for the community member who asked that question, I would love if you just let me know how that goes once you have that conversation. We're praying with you, and I'd like to follow up. 2 more questions real quick. A person said, how do we rebuild ourselves and our trust in another community? So I don't know if they're talking about SAI or if they're just talking about church. But I think there's a couple of things, and we'll talk about these more like really in depth in the table groups. I've got some interviews where we're going to talk about some of this stuff too. But I think that a couple of things that you can do to start the rebuilding process. Surround yourself with some people you can be honest with. Okay. Whether that's in our community or just some family and friends that didn't attend the church that you were at, it's important that you have at least a handful of people that you can be 100% completely yourself with, that you don't have to put up a facade, that you don't have to act like you got it together. You don't have to worry about hurting their feelings. For me, as someone who's been a pastor for a long time, that group included people when I was going through the worst, hurt and pain. it included people that I could cuss around who weren't going to judge me. I had a lot of pain. There was stuff that was going to come out. I couldn't talk to everybody the way I could talk to my inner circle. So again, whether that's close family and friends, or whether that's coming to the community and saying, hey, Jeff, are there some people that I can talk to? I think that's the first thing. To rebuild yourself, you have to be able to be open and honest about what you're feeling, about what happened. Being able to tell the truth about what happened and the truth about what you're feeling is massive. And you have to be able to do that a lot over time to heal. You don't just tell your story once and heal. You don't just talk to people about what you're feeling once and heal. It's a process of unpacking that. One of the ways that I describe it a lot is it's like when we go through spiritual abuse, it's like we have this ball of just mangled, tangled stuff. All these feelings, all these things, all these untruths that we have to pull out one by one. And they're slimy and they're gross and we don't want to deal with it. But until we deal with it, it's just like you got this thing on your chest, this thing in your stomach. So that's the first thing that I would do. And when you surround yourself with people that you feel like you can trust, again, that builds your trust in community as well. It doesn't just help you heal. It helps you build your trust. There are good people out there. But if you're trying to build your trust in another community and you're talking about church, the red flag reviews, when we get those out, are going to be really helpful. Church safe assessments are going to be really helpful. One of the best ways you can trust yourself is to trust in a community, do your research and ask good questions up front. And don't be scared. If you see something on the website that's a red flag, that's too big for you, you ask a question, you get an answer that doesn't feel right. Don't be scared to just immediately disengage, right? So part of the way that you learn to trust a new community is you ask good questions up front, you do your research up front to make sure it's a healthier place. That's also going to keep you from going to some places that probably would be really, really comfortable. So I think, again, red flag reviews, the Trustworthy Church Pledge, some stuff like that is going to actually help you. If we're talking about something like SAI that's not a church, again, make sure that you align with them missionally. And then I would just, test the waters. Like you can jump in the community and not say a word. Just watch how other people are responded to and see if it looks safe. And then if it looks safe, try it with a few other people. We got quite a few people in the community. They don't talk a lot because they're trying to see if it's safe. Okay. And again, anybody who joins our community doesn't feel like it's safe enough, you will not hurt my feelings. Go ahead, disconnect, right? We want to make it safe for you though. But so if you're trying to find trust in a community that's not a church, I would try to find a place where you can at least be either anonymous or somewhat of a fly on the wall. Watch, ask questions, do your research similar to the church, and engage as you have seen evidence of health. Engage as you've seen evidence of protection, while at the same time keeping the outside group of people that you can trust that you're being honest with, because they may see any potential red flags in the future quicker than you would. So if something starts going wrong, you keeping that inner circle outside the church that you're connected to, they're going to see it. They may be able to help you, before you get there. And then last question, one more question. This one's totally not about SAI. But it says, and I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but I'm going to do my best to answer. It just says tithing and encouraging extra tithing past 10%. So I think they're just asking a question of what do I think about tithing and churches who ask people to tithe above and beyond 10%. Honestly, the best way that I can answer that question, I can tell you a lot of us misunderstand what Scripture says about tithing, and tithing is really easily manipulated, okay, to get people to give more money. It can be used in really abusive situations. But the best way I can answer that question is actually, we'll just link the video right here. We did a 2-part podcast series, 2 episodes, where we talked about nothing but what the Bible says about tithing. I can link an episode where we talked about miracle offerings and how churches use those to have you give above and beyond 10%. A church can use tithing healthily and encourage you to give more than 10% in a healthy way. But those 2 podcast episodes and the miracle offering documentary are going to help you really get a good grasp of what the unhealthy red flags are, as well as I'll link this playlist These are different responses and stuff that we had to questions we got commonly after the tithing episodes on the podcast. So all those together, that's a ton of content. I'm going to give you better answers there than I'm going to give you today. And it's not that I don't want to answer you today. It's just without doing my research and looking at that again, I don't want to say something wrong when we were fully researched up on it when we did those episodes. That's the best place to go to get information on tithing and churches asking you to tithe more than 10%. But anyway, guys, this was different. We probably won't do a ton of solo podcasts. And if we do, there'll be Q&As that are everywhere from now on. But I hope that this was really helpful as far as SAI goes. I hope that you feel much more comfortable with who we are, what we're doing. If questions have popped up today, more questions have popped up, ask us in the community, send us DMs, send us an email through the contact form on the website. We want to answer as many of your questions as possible. Again, we want to help you and anybody who's asking questions about SAI to feel very comfortable about the Spiritual Abuse Institute, our mission, what we're doing. For those non-SAI questions, I hope that those were helpful as well. But again, we won't do a ton of episodes that are just solo Q&A. But one thing we do want to do, I want to start answering. We want to start answering as many of your questions as we can. So if you haven't joined the community already, join the community. And we're going to be putting like a permanent link up there, a permanent channel where you guys can go and ask those questions. So again, if you want to leave us a voice question, go ahead and join the community. Ask about that. We'll connect you where you can do that. And we'll continue doing those on as many episodes as we can. We'll do a segment where we answer a couple of questions. But anyway, we love you guys. If you feel like you want to donate, you can donate here, or you can just go to the website linked in the description, click on the Give tab. But again, any questions that pop up, let us know. We're pumped about the Spiritual Abuse Institute. We're pumped about these projects, this research, these resources, what's coming next. And the reason we're pumped about it is because, guys, we believe that healing is coming for you. We believe that healthier churches are coming, and we're going to fight with everything we have to help people heal from spiritual abuse and religious trauma. We're going to fight with everything we have to help see healthy churches, safe churches created. So thank you for joining us on this journey. And for everybody who listened all the way through the podcast today, thank you so much for your support. We love you guys. We're praying for you. Grace and peace. And and until the next time, keep those questions coming. If any of them pop up, we'll see you on the next episode of the Church Disrupted podcast.